Putin is a lawyer. People say, oh, he is KGB, implying that he was some lethal assassin creeping around in the shadows, sticking pins in people. He's a friggin' lawyer, okay? And anybody that's been to law school knows, and this is not just in the United States, you're taught a particular way of thinking. And part of that is assessing risk. You're always assessing the risk, whatever, I've used the joke in the past that to illustrate why you need a lawyer, that when I first was in a condo on the beach, I rubbed the lamp, out came a genie and said, you got one wish. I said, I want to be on the beach with 3 scantily clad women. Wish granted. It was then that I discovered I should have consulted a lawyer, because the 3 women that showed up were all 85 years old, okay, in bikinis. So the lawyer would have stipulated, lawyer would have stipulated age, weight, But the point is, so Putin
really important to get into the details. Let me just say,
Putin approaches this from the detail standpoint. They first, in April of 2022, were willing to accept a deal. Russia was willing to accept, as Lavrov has said to me personally. He said in the interview with Kirsten Welker the other day, a deal that would have left Donetsk and Luhansk, the Donbass, in Ukraine under a Ukrainian flag, but there would have had to have been some special protections for the Russian speakers. Fine, that was rejected. Okay, the next deal on the table was presented in June of 2024 by Vladimir Putin when he spoke to the foreign ministry. And in that, now it's a different deal. All of a sudden, the 5 oblasts, that's Crimea, Zaporizhia, Kherson, Donetsk, Luhansk, those 5 oblasts that have all voted to join Russia Federation, they are now permanently part of Russia. So Putin's not going to negotiate that away. The West can say, oh, you only control 75% of it. Doesn't matter. He's keeping, those are Russia territory. They're not giving it up under any circumstances, period. End of discussion. Not going to happen. Then the other thing he insisted was NATO's got to get the hell out of Ukraine, and Ukraine's got to get the hell out of our territory. And then we can negotiate an end to this war. Otherwise, we're going to keep moving forward. And you know what? If we keep moving forward and taking other territory, we're going to keep that too. Been very clear on that. They've said it over and over and over. But we think they're kidding. No, they don't mean that. No, they do. And that's the problem. That's the problem with Trump.
Now, with most in the West, and we get to see some more examples here in a minute, but we had Ambassador Polyansky, Russian deputy UN ambassador, here on the show a couple of days ago, and he made that point verbatim to me that you said a second ago. He went back to the 2022 and said every time we've offered diplomatic off-ramps, the next time there are worse conditions and worse terms for the Western side. And he said if this one doesn't get taken, I don't even know what may follow the next, but it won't be as good as what's on the table here. But we don't believe it. I'm going to get to you a second why I think that many on the West don't take that seriously. But first of all, I want to show you something. This is a kind of a combo clip here. It's got both Trump and Lavrov, Trump at the beginning of it, and both of them, to one extent or another, talking about the legitimacy of Zelensky to even sign a deal should one be made.
The issue of who is going to sign the deal on Ukrainian side is a very serious issue. When we come to a stage when you have to sign documents, we would need a very clear understanding by everybody that the person who is signing is legitimate. And according to the Ukrainian constitution, Mr. Zelensky is not at the moment.
I want to get it to stop. And it will not be a world war, but it will be an economic war. And an economic war is going to be bad. And it's going to be bad for Russia. And I don't want that. Now, I have to also see, because not everybody, Zelensky is not exactly innocent either.
Just wondering if the Russians have been relaying this to your team, if they view Zelensky, as a leader worth signing a peace deal with, if they will.
Doesn't matter what they say. Steve can answer, but I can answer too. Doesn't matter what they say. Everybody's posturing. It's all bullshit, okay? Everybody's posturing.
So
Man,
you see
no,
that Trump, he doesn't believe anything the Russians say. Just BS.
yeah. I mean, candidly, Trump needs to pull his head out of his corpulent ass to say something so abjectly stupid that they don't mean it. They absolutely do mean it. And I come back, Putin is a lawyer. Under the Ukrainian constitution, there were supposed to be elections a year and a half ago. But Zelensky suspended the constitution, suspended the law, and declared basically martial law where he's in charge. He gets to continue to be in office. And from Russia's standpoint, that's not, if let's say legal order is restored to Ukraine, if someone could make the case in the courts in Ukraine that all the actions by Zelensky subsequent to have him declaring that martial law, the suspension of the Constitution, that all of his decisions were unconstitutional and could not be respected, which means from Russia's standpoint, any agreement that he enters into is not relevant. So that they're not making a debating point. Lavrov and Putin are strictly, these guys, they take the written rules and written laws pretty seriously. And that's the problem in the West. We don't think they pay attention to it. They absolutely do. They go over every single word, every single phrase. So, again, Trump in that, I'm appalled by his behavior, by his ignorance. And what makes ignorance so dangerous is when it's accompanied by hubris. He can, throw his weight around. Go ahead, apply sanctions. It shows he doesn't even understand the true state of the Russian economy. Would you rather be the United States, where you're 125% over 100% of your income? Your debt to GDP ratio is in the negative, or would you rather be Russia, where there's 19%? Would you rather be Russia, where you can produce all the artillery shells that your army needs to sustain combat on a daily basis, or be the United States, who cannot supply enough for Ukraine to stay in operation for 3 weeks? Would you rather be Russia, who can fly its astronauts to the space station and back, who can service all of its modules in outer space, or the United States, who has to come to Russia and say, can we get a ride? Huh? Can we go along with you? I mean, for God's sake, America has got to stop looking in the mirror and pretending that it's the evil stepmother, wicked stepmother. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? The mirror's paid to lie to you. Oh, you fat bastard, you are great looking.
Yeah, you had to go down that whole list there.
Oh my God.
Well, as it turns out, I referenced this earlier, part of the reason why no one either believes or just doesn't listen to Russia in terms of what they're going to do and what they need on the battlefield, and why they continue to push for maximalist gains on the West, is because they don't believe that the situation on the battlefront is as bad as what's claimed. Here is one of your favorites, Bill Browder, talking about how actually Putin's in a panic.
Putin puts on a brave face. He pretends everything is fine. He doesn't care. His war is going well. He's absolutely, panicking back in his bunker about all this stuff, because the only way that he can carry on doing this war is if the Russian people don't turn on him. And it's easy to prevent the people from turning on him if he's got money to slosh around out there. And he's been sloshing it around pretty well, paying soldiers a lot of money, paying the families a lot of money, etc. But if the money dries up, then he's got a problem.
So this guy is so knowledgeable and so deep in his intimate understanding of the Russians that he recognizes that they're all driven by money. And if the money dries up, then they'll abandon Putin at the first sign of trouble. What do you say?
Well, again, referencing Browder, whose grandfather was the founder of the American Communist Party, and his father, so he has strong ties back to the old communist ideology. Alex Craner has written an excellent book on that. Hey, so let's talk about popular support. Here's Browder. I think he's living in the UK now.
That's my understanding.
He's talking about the panic Putin, who's got 80% public approval in Russia, compared to Keir Starmer, who's got 20% approval. I don't think Browder understands the meaning of the word panic. Okay. Somebody, maybe it's like a second language for him. Somebody needs to go reading the definition. That he would be correct that if the economy in Russia was tanking, but as I pointed out, right now the economy in Russia they put in measures to control inflation. That meant they raised interest rates last October to 22%. They're now down to 18%. So they've dropped them because they brought the growth rate down from 4.7% to 1.5%. However, in the UK where Browder's living, the growth rate is 0.2%. Essentially, it's stagnant. It's in recession. So, the Putin and the Russian economy, they're doing fine. They've got room for error. They've got room for recovery. They've got natural resources. They're not, one of the reasons that you worry about economic growth and finance is, geez, if we need to borrow money, can we borrow money? And will they want to lend us the money? Russia doesn't need to borrow money. It's got what it needs internally, and they are very fiscally conservative, something that we don't know anything about in the West. So, yeah, Browder may be, the unusual, that communist who becomes a billionaire and has made money off of exploiting his old family ties. But the fact of the matter is,
but I thought the whole thing about communism was redistribution of wealth and to give the money to the proletariat and all that kind of stuff. So why is he keeping all that money? I mean, I'm thinking there's something wrong with this picture. You're right. But it's the redistribution of wealth. I'm going to take your money and give it to me. Okay. I can use it better than you. Yeah, maybe that's where the redistribution's coming in. But the problem is that a lot of people listen to him, and that's why he keeps getting put on, these shows, because he says the story that a lot of people want to hear. And of course, people who are listening to it who, don't watch the Daniel Davis Deep Dive or go to sonar21.com, they may believe what they're being told here. And then you add on to that. Here's another interview on British media today of Francis Farrell, who is a reporter for the Kiev Independent. And for those who may recall, if you notice, we've actually had him on our show once before because he was given at the time some pretty frank and honest assessments of what he had seen at the front line. There seems to have been some change in him, because here's how he, and I think this was earlier today, is characterizing the war in Ukraine.
The Russians, they seem to be picking up the pace on the battlefield, but it's important to understand that the Ukrainian defense remains stable. Yes, they have huge issues with manpower, but for now it remains stable, and any of these Russian gains are coming at huge costs, because that's the only way they know how to attack. They're not able of making big breakthroughs. They're not capable of this. So there's a lot of pain still ahead, but if Ukraine can just hold the line and work on improving its solid defense, eventually the question of why does Russia stop will be answered by the fact that they just don't have any more people to just keep throwing into this meat grinder.
That is just nearly the most bizarre thing I've ever heard, to suggest that the Ukraine side can wear down the Russian side. All those things that you've already mentioned about economics, production capacities, natural resources, manpower. And even he started off this conversation talking about how, well, I know we have a huge problem in his terms with manpower, but we have stabilized the front, and now then the Russians will be ground down till they can't fight anymore. How do you see that?
Yeah, this is a Ukrainian version of Baghdad Bob. You remember when you were in a tank driving into Iraq, Baghdad Bob was insisting you weren't there. You see Danny waving out of the hatch of the tank. Here we come. The facts on the ground simply tell a different story. That the typical criticism out of Jack Keane and all the, Ben Hodges and all these generals is to say how slow the Russian advance has gone because they haven't taken that much territory. Well, that would be a fair criticism if Russia said, you know what, we need to take 100% of Ukrainian territory by 2025. But they've never said that. All they said from the beginning is we're going to demilitarize Ukraine. Well, one way to demilitarize it is by killing their soldiers, blowing up their tanks, blowing up their armored personnel carriers, destroying their airlift, whatever remains of air power, which is exactly what Russia's been doing. And yeah, one of the reasons for the slow advance is Russia prefers to use drones, to use bombs, to use artillery. They're not going to send their soldiers forward in human meat assaults. They're not doing that. In fact, they've shifted their tactics to the point that once they soften an area up, they'll send in 4 to 6 guys on motorcycles. And then they quickly storm the positions.